The first question, what are some of the most common preventable problems in couples' relationships?
I'm going to start with something very specific that really helped us. When Dan fell in love with me, he read every book on couples relationships. He talked to a psychologist, and the psychologist said, Dan, you're worried too much. Good people make good marriages, so just work on your character, which is what we've done with our own counseling and everything. And it's just made a big difference. Good character, people of good character aren't selfish. They're not defensive. They can think in terms of we versus me. They can be a team. It's not that they lose their individuality. You need two individuals in a marriage. Sure. But you shouldn't always be thinking about my spouse making me happy, or my spouse needs to be better or more perfect or whatever for me. No, it's a we. And you have your own humility. You have your own faults too. So I really just think all those things that make up good character make up good marriages. Mm-hmm.
And that me to we is a critical transition, because I've worked with younger couples, married 3-4 years, and they're really struggling because one or both of them have not made that transition. We're no longer a me, it's a we. Mm-hmm. And so you have two people or some person trying to live a single person's life while married. And of course that creates all kinds of conflicts.
Right.
So the internal work is to go, there's no longer a me. There's only a we. Mm-hmm. Everything I do affects her. Everything she does affects me. That's the nature of the relationship. Mm-hmm. So I can't just do what I want to do when I want to do it. Now, that doesn't mean I have to have her permission either. That's not the point. The point is there's a mutuality there where I respect her and I want her to know what I'm thinking, what I'm doing. I just don't unilaterally go do stuff and then tell her about it later. That's not we. That's me being me and giving her an FYI.
Right. So that's consideration and respect. Mutuality is huge. Mutuality is huge. You should mutually make decisions. We are mutually respectful, mutually humble. I just can't overemphasize mutuality. Hopefully mutually mature.
Yeah, I think good marriage relationships or good relationships at all are mutual in the sense that we're different. I mean, she's got skills and abilities I don't have, and I can do some things that she doesn't do. So we're different, but we're equal, and we work together. I mean, it would make no sense for me to try to do the things that she does so well, or for her to do the things that I can do well. We have our divisions of labor, and we work well together as a team, and we're mutual at it. We talk about it.
Right, we agree on it.
Right.
Well, so one of the things that I've noticed with some of the younger couples is that communication skills just aren't there.
Oh my goodness, how long do we have?
I wish we had a whole hour, but we don't.
Well,
so
let me just offer this real quickly then. Yeah. There's communication. Most couples can communicate well. What they can't do well is communicate emotionally. Their emotional communication isn't there. They can speak the language, they can figure out when the kids are coming home or when the dog needs fed, but when it comes to the relationship itself, as to how I feel, how I think, what I need, what I want, and talking about it together, that's pretty hard to come by. And in their defense, most of them have never seen that. They've not really seen that level of connection where we can talk about in emotional terms about the relationship itself. So one of the things I try to train my couples to do is at least once a week, they say to each other, how are we doing? And they both know by we, I'm not talking about, hey, how's your life? You doing okay? The kid's good, are fine. They're talking about how is this relationship doing? Is there anything we need to work on? Is there a complaint you need to bring to me? Is there something I might need to say to you? So it's understood, and I try to train them to do that every week and make that a safe place and a safe time to talk about how they're feeling about each other. And if they can do that, they can keep their decks clear. And they're willing to take, it's vulnerable risk, because if I say, how are we doing? She might say, you're doing badly, buddy. And I might have to listen to something I really don't want to hear, but need to hear. But that's the permission I've given her by saying, how are we doing?
Right.
And she knows she has that permission anytime anyway, but for couples who have not developed that quality, that habit of checking in with each other, boy, can they get backed up. And then they hit my office and it all comes out and fills the room up because they have not kept the decks clear. And we're talking about things that happened 20 years ago.
So what is the most common problem that you see in your practice with couples?
I think I'd have to say what she said earlier is selfishness.
Yep.
Just they've not gotten over themselves. They still want to do what they want to do the way they want to do it. They don't play well. They don't negotiate and compromise, which is the oil and the grease of any good marriage. I'm not always going to get what I want, and that's okay. That's expected. I'm going to negotiate out something so we both get something that we want and need. Okay, and after almost 40 years of marriage, I can think of only 3 or 4 times where one of us had to make a decision because we couldn't agree on it.
Right.
And
Think of 2.
you can think of 2. Okay, I don't think a couple others. But the norm was we talk about it until we can agree on it and come out to some compromise that works for both of us.
Right.
I think 3 out of the times I remember I was dead wrong. I mean, I was just dead wrong. I made the wrong decision and paid the consequences for it. But my point there is you work until you can agree on something. And if that takes 2 months, so be it. That's so much better than somebody just pulling rank or doing whatever they want to do without it being something that's done together.
Right. That is very important, and if nothing can be taken away from this talk today, one is the we, from the transition to we, but the thing that is most important, I think, is the fact that you have to do it together. Because I think one of the common problems is one wants it, but the other doesn't. One wants to talk about it and communicate, but the other doesn't. Or the other person doesn't hear, or the other person resists, or the other person keeps saying, no, it's not my problem, it's yours. Right. I hear that a lot with a lot of struggling couples. So anyway, we hope this gives encouragement to a lot of the young couples, because a lot of them are starting out to maybe have the type of the we relationship that ultimately makes for a good marriage and character. I think that's a very good point, too.
The other thing we suggest many times is you pick a time during the week where that's all you're going to do is talk about that, where it's an open, safe space. So every week, it doesn't even have to be more than an hour. Just we're going to check in with each other.
It has to be a safe environment.
It has to be safe. Both parties have to agree to the rules. That we're going to stay to the subject. Nobody gets to just bail out or get angry and push the other person away and leave or stonewall them in all the other ways we can. We're going to listen, and we're going to listen with intent to work out and resolve this issue.
Right. Absolutely. Okay, so in a conflict, when is the ideal time to bring up a conversation, being mindful that you don't want to bring it up when the other person is stressed out, tired, etc.?
So again, this is something where you set that structure in place before you have the conflict. And by structure, you basically have mutually agreed upon rules about how you're going to handle conflict. 2 things come to mind. Actually, both of them come from the Seattle psychologist. Gottman. He talks a lot about the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. He literally tells you to take your pulse, and if the female's pulse is over 100 and the male's over 90, time out. You're not going to get anything accomplished, nothing accomplished. And so you talk about this stuff ahead of time. You agree to respect each other's time out. You agree maybe not to talk at 10:30 at night or 11 like I used to do to you when we were newlyweds or midnight. And they're like, are you asleep? He's trying so hard, couldn't stay up. Yeah. You know, you talk about those things and ahead of time. And then you have signals or cues or words, keywords that you use. I hated the title. We mentor couples as couples, so 2-on-2, and it's a lot of fun. And one of the exercises is rules of fair fighting. And I always hated that title. That is the one exercise that went on the refrigerator, and those couples used that. And again, they decided ahead of time how to fight. Gottman also talks about a complaint versus a criticism. A criticism is a personal character attack. It's not going to help the marriage at all. It assumes ill will. You meant to hurt me. A complaint assumes goodwill, but ignorance. and it assumes that if you understood how I was processing this, you would behave differently. And then it follows up with that different behavior, the request for change. For example, say the wife is freaking out if the husband doesn't call if he's 30 minutes late from work. Instead of going, you don't care about me, blah, 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 that is the criticism. The complaint would say, we need to talk. And you need to know that when you don't call and you're more than 30 minutes late, I'm seriously considering calling the cops to go look for you. I'm a wreck. I'm starting to plan your funeral, So I need you to call if you're going to be more than 20 minutes late. And we can get through this. That's the difference between like a criticism and a complaint. So
that's an important distinction to make, because how we approach each other about something that needs to be resolved has a lot to do with whether it'll be successfully resolved.
Absolutely.
So I really like the idea of agreeing how and when you're going to do that, and everybody's on board with what that means. The other thing you mentioned too, I just want to emphasize, when I have couples come in and they have been fighting or discussing from 10 a.m. till 2 a.m., that's unadvisable, and they both have lost sleep. Nothing gets resolved. It went straight downhill. By 2 o'clock, they wanted a divorce, and so I've had to work with them to say, let's choose not to do that, because I can tell you what's going to happen. Same thing happens every time. Let's agree that after 10 o'clock, we're not going to bring up anything. Unless the house is on fire, in which case walk out calmly. We're not bringing this up. We're going to wait till tomorrow when we're all in our right mind, we've had some rest. And amazingly, sometimes these things disappear when people get up in the morning.
Light of day.
It's that halt thing. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Bad time to bring up important issues. Don't do it.
So the next question by this young couple is, what is the best way to handle the intense emotions, particularly anger, in a relationship?
We answered this from the opposite direction. So I answered it about my own anger or your own anger, and he answered, is that how we did it? And he answered about handling other people's anger.
Oh, well, then we have both the best of both worlds. All right. Yeah.
So some of the things I said were, again, self-observation. Again, when you know you're having an overreaction, to kind of slow down, zoom out, have this sort of wide-angle perspective and ask yourself why you're angry, and let that be the starting point, so that when you discuss it, what your spouse did that made you angry, you can maybe present it in the complaint versus and not the criticism. You can have like the solution to suggest, that kind of thing. One thing about anger and anxiety, it triggers the sympathetic nervous system, and when that's triggered, your adrenaline instructs your brain to give up all the oxygenated blood it doesn't need to live. You literally can't think straight. Your frontal cortex is literally just surviving. And so it can take 1.5 to 2 hours for that to subside. So do that work of letting it subside. Get a toolbox full of self-soothing and self-calming things to do: music, humor, walk, sunshine. Just deal with it inside first, but as soon as you can, deal with it with your mate. A lot of times people want to be nice, especially wives tend to want to be nice, and they'll stuff. Oh, husbands do this too. Stuff.
I see that in the guys a lot.
Explode.
Yeah. Stuff.
And so deal with it before it gets so big, if you can. Anything to add?
I absolutely agree with it. It's important to keep the decks clear. And I use that phrase with my couples quite a bit, like, you got to keep your decks clear. You're letting stuff stack up. And I give them the analogy, what would happen if I didn't take our garbage out for 6 weeks?
Stinky.
It'd get really stinky. The garage would be full, then it'd have to come in the family room, and after that into the living room. Pretty soon it's upstairs, and the place is going to smell terrible. So what do? Every Tuesday night, one of the two of us takes it out our very short driveway, and this nice man in the big truck takes it away. Problem solved. Keep your decks clear. And that's an important piece of it. A couple other things I would say about from the perspective of receiving somebody else's anger.
Right.
And more often than not, we don't see it coming. Somebody can just lose their mind on us. And it's certainly shocking, and we're going to have that feeling of, oh my gosh, I just got my hair parted. What's going on here? And as hard as it is, we got to work really hard to not react in a defensive manner and counterattack, because that's the temptation is, oh yeah, well, and then you've got two angry people, and you don't even really know what's going on. Because a lot of the time, it has nothing to do with the person who just received the anger. It has more to do with what's going on in the angry person. Right. And that needs to have some calmness to even uncover that that's not really about you. I had a bad day at work, and this guy did this or that, and you were the first one I met, and so I parted your hair. So we have to extend the benefit of the doubt that it could be this isn't anything about me, but I'm on the receiving end of it. Right. Because that does happen. We're all human. Sometimes we take it out on the wrong people. So try to be as calm as possible. Back away from the situation if you need to. If you don't feel like you can manage it, say, hey, I got to go. I need to get some space here. But then come back, and then hopefully they'll do what you were suggesting, and I need to do what I'm suggesting, so I'm not coming back with why'd you do that to me? I can't believe that you yelled at me. I didn't do anything. I'm an innocent party. In other words, defensive. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Instead, I'm ready to come here. Man, what's going on with you, dude? Mm-hmm. You've lost your mind. Help me understand what's hurting you. What happened today? Right. And I think that just will give you a much better result.
Right. Rather than being accusatory or defensive, you were mentioning.
Yep. Before we go on, I feel a need, a compulsion to talk to young couples about avoiding being in a relationship with a narcissist. Yeah. Yes. I have been so impressed in a very negative way. Narcissism is rampant in our culture. I think we have disrespect for the law for that. I think we have parents who don't discipline their children. I think we've got an entitled culture. I think we've got participation trophies that have just fostered that it's all about me and it should be about me, and I'm going to make sure everything you do benefits me. Okay, so the way I would describe a narcissist is somebody who truly lacks the ability to empathize and have compassion for other people. In other words, put themselves in their position, in their shoes, and have empathy for them. They also don't tolerate criticism. They're always right. You are an extension of them. So your job is to do just what they need you to do, and to also tell them how wonderful they are. Another, hold the mirror up and say, you're amazing. You do amazing stuff. And there's some other qualities too. But when you run into somebody like that, I'm suggesting run, do not walk. Right. Run away from this person. And I say that because I deal with people who have gotten tangled with a narcissist, and it never ends well. And I'm not saying somebody can't change, but I'm saying one of the hardest things to do as a therapist is to help a narcissist see that they're not the only person in the world, and to help them develop empathy. It is an uphill battle. So unfortunately, someone who tends to be codependent are the ones that these narcissists will prey on. They'll come find them. It's truly amazing to me how the narcissist finds the person that they can use. And they say all the right things. They do all the right stuff.
Charming.
They're charming as the day is long, but unfortunately they're not encumbered by a conscience. So they can do all these things and appear authentic, and yet they're not at all. They're all for the benefit of the narcissist. And then you get pulled into that, make a commitment of some kind, and then the wheels come off. Mm-hmm. So I just feel compelled to say, watch out. Be careful. They're out there. Mm-hmm. They're not all men, too. I have bumped into some female narcissists, so this is not necessarily a gender thing. But understand, they make terrible relationship partners. Mm-hmm. It will not end well. Mm-hmm. Know what it looks like and run the other way.
Thank you. I think that was I'm so glad you brought that up, and hope our young people heard that loud and clear. Yeah. But thank you for that. So before we end this section on couples, relationship, I have one question that's unscripted. And this question comes from your daughter.
We're in trouble.
No.
We're done.
It's actually a very well thought out question. Everyone has flaws they struggle to improve throughout their life. Throughout your long, successful marriage, how have you supported each other in these flaws and dealt with frustration regarding the other's flaws?
One thing, you quote me sometimes.
I do.
Yes, love is not all just warm and fuzzy. Love loves the other person too much to not shine the flashlight on those flaws. So sometimes I'll say to Dan, I love you too much to not tell you this, and he knows I'm going to hold the mirror up, and vice versa. And just talk about it and offer to support and request change. The other thing is sort of to not counterbalance that, but to balance that, would be realizing we are all human and we have human traits. I will never be detail-oriented. I will never be a neatnik, but I try to clean better, organize a little better, be a little neater, because I know it bothers him. I'm short, he's tall. Yeah, I used to not see anything from about 5 feet down, and Dan's walking in the house at 6'3" and looking at half an inch dust up all around above the 5 foot line, so I started looking at things through his eyes and look up a little bit. So it's that balance of accepting each other, flaws and all, but also speaking into it because I love him. We love each other.
Yeah, I think that love and acceptance is honestly the key, because everyone's got flaws. She's got them, I've got them. I remember, it may have taken me a few years, but there's some things that she just doesn't do that seems to pluck my last nerve. But I got to the point some time ago where I just decided I'll totally let it go. It's just not something that she pays attention to. So you know what? I get to do it. And I'm not going to do it with a bad attitude or going, wrestling, why can't she do this? I'm going, this is a labor of love that I can extend to her. And there was nothing to go to the mats for anyway. And most of the stuff people argue about, like, really? You argued about that? And it was one of those things. But, I mean, it could have been, but I got to the place where if I want something like that done, I'm going to do it myself, and I'm going to do it cheerfully, and I'm going to be happily.
For the sake of the relationship.
For the sake of the relationship. I don't want to keep bugging her about it, say, you need to do this, and being a jerk about it. I'm just going to go ahead and do it graciously, extending my love toward her. And that's been a great thing, and it's worked out really, really well. And the other wonderful thing about her, she is just inherently not a nagger. She is just not somebody who's just going to keep pinging at you with something. That's just not who she is. And that's really important. Yes. And I would wish that for every wife with their husband, that they just understand that nagging him isn't going to get you anything except a negative response and a shutdown. Right. You got to find another way to approach the problem, like agreeing I can bring complaints to you at a certain time. Right. And then we get to handle it because we've agreed on that. I'm not going to remind you 4 times a day. I know men don't like that very much.
Right. Nope, that is a universal theme.
And men like you to be direct.
That's true, direct. But no one likes to be nagged. I mean,
Right.
it's like, who wants to be nagged? But it's sometimes a art form that that is manifested very easily. But anyway, well, I think you guys did well, marrying all those years ago, being together, and not only blessing each other and your children, but the many that you've worked with over the years. So thank you, Dan and Rachel, and God bless.